What's going on, guys? Welcome back to WWE Network and Show, where I, Graham G. Matthews, break down all the original content you watch on the WWE Network, on Peacock, and on Vice. As today we're talking Season 5, Episode 8 of Dark Side of the Ring on Sensational Sherri. Good episode here, as they always are. A depressing episode, but a good episode nonetheless. I think they covered part of her career when she was with Macho Man in the Macho Man and Elizabeth episode all the way back in Season 1. I've said this before, but before we get going here with the review, it is funny, not funny, but like fucked up, I don't know what you would call it, interesting, that when you watch these shows, like you could take a tally of how many other episodes kind of interweave and are mentioned in these episodes. Like, not like the episodes themselves, but for example, in this episode alone, they mentioned Sunny, who had her own episode last season. The drug trial, the WWE steroid trial back in the 90s, that was mentioned in this episode. That was its own episode. Fabulous Moolah was its own thing. Macho Man and Elizabeth, that was its own thing. Macho Man and Elizabeth, back in Season 1. There's a lot of like interweaving, even Jake Roberts and his sister, Rockin' Robin. That was its own episode too. Not on them specifically, but their awful father, Grizzly Roberts, Adams, whatever the fuck it was. But yeah, I mean, so it's interesting when they have so many dark subjects sect with each other on these episodes. Doesn't mean anything, but I just thought that was interesting. So anyway, they opened the episode with Jim Cornette talking about how Sensational Sherri actually was the first person that he ever managed, which I did not know. He showed off a picture at the end of the episode that she signed for him, saying that "you will forever be my first," or something like that. Just a really nice photo that he obviously hung on to, which was nice. We hear from her friend Kathy throughout the episode, and she mentions that she was Sherri's best friend. And she mentions Sherri's like upbringing a little bit, that not much is really known about it aside from the fact that she didn't know her father. Sherri didn't know her father, that is. And that she would go to wrestling matches with her mom. I don't know if her mom was a fan and she brought Sherri, or Sherri dragged her mom because she was a fan. I don't know, but that was how she became a fan. Jake Roberts, who was also interviewed for the episode, really close with Sherri, which I guess I just didn't know that. He mentions how he met her and they were young. He was a referee at the time. They actually started dating and they were on and off for like 4 or 5 years. Again, did not know that either. And they mention how she always wanted to be a star. Always wanted to be a wrestling star specifically. We hear a lot from her ex-husband, Leroy. And he even mentions how he met her, I think at a club. Like she was I think she was a stripper or a dancer or something like that, I think. Or they were just there, but I'm pretty sure that's what she was doing when he met her. They ended up getting married soon after, actually. And he mentioned that she would always come back from hanging out with her friends with drugs, like drugs of all different kinds. They ended up having a kid. She mentioned later on that they divorced, but she said that in, we hear from Sherri on this episode. She obviously passed away. But the interview that they show of her was probably from right before she passed away in the 2000s, if I'm not mistaken. Like one of those shoot interviews. She mentioned that they got divorced, but maybe that was well after what they're talking about in the remainder of the episode, because she had to like continue taking care of her kid, unless they were divorced or separated or whatever, and they were talking about her being like an absentee divorced mother that never saw her kid. They made it sound like they were still together when she didn't go home to visit the kid or the husband, but if they were divorced, then that wouldn't be a problem. So I don't know at what timeline they got divorced. You could probably easily look that up, but it doesn't really matter. She was trained by a gentleman named Butch Moore, apparently. Jake's father, again, the aforementioned grizzly guy, that just terrible human being. They covered him on another episode a few seasons ago. Actually ended up taking a liking to her, and they mentioned that, I mean, obviously he had a thing for young girls. That was what his whole episode was about. He's a fucking rapist. Sherri, I think, was a bit too old for him, actually, which was interesting. She ended up going to train with Moolah soon after, partied too much, and got kicked off the compound. Had to leave the camp as a result. And leaving Moolah was probably the best thing for her, because Moolah was a piece of shit too. Leroy, mentions, I don't know why you would admit this, he didn't really know where she was a lot of the time, so he hired a private investigator to go follow her. And he was told to leave her alone by a bunch of wrestlers that confronted him one time, probably coming from the bank or something, and they were like, listen, we'll fuck you up unless you leave her alone. And I think again, I don't know if they were still married or if they weren't together. I mean, the private investigator thing is fucking weird anyway. But if that was her husband, then she would probably have a right. I mean, he doesn't have a right to do that sort of thing. But if they're telling her, these wrestlers are telling him to leave her alone, I would have to imagine they were no longer married. Because why would you say that to the woman's husband? He has every reason to know where she is. But again, hiring the private investigator was definitely fucking weird, and he should not have done that. So they mention how, well, we hear from Rockin' Robin, who is Jake Roberts' sister, which I did not know before watching that Jake Roberts episode a few seasons ago. They mention how having kids was frowned upon in wrestling. Medusa mentions that too. She was also interviewed for this episode because she was close with Sherri. We hear from the son. I forgot what the son's name was. They don't mention what his issue is, but Kathy goes, I think he has cancer. Like, I don't know why she would just speculate that unless we know for a fact what he has. They never asked him. But he looks really not good. Like, he can barely talk. They have to put subtitles up for him. He looks like he might do crack or something like that. Again, I don't want to speculate because they don't say what his issue is. If he had any issue, he just doesn't look well at his... I mean, he's definitely not 60. He's probably closer to like 40 or something, maybe late 30s. I don't know. I mean, he wasn't born in the 70s, so I'm not exactly sure. But he does not look well, does the son. And it's unfortunate to see. And again, Kathy goes, I think he has cancer. I mean, maybe, but they didn't confirm that, so I don't know. It was weird. But they mentioned, or he talks a lot throughout the episode about really never seeing his mom at all. And even says, like, he was asked, are you bitter towards the fact that you never really got to see her? And he goes, I'm angry. I'm still angry about it. Like, was he angry then was their question. He goes, I'm still angry. I didn't get to see her often. We hear about Jesse Ventura and Kurt Hennig, a.k.a. Mr. Perfect, putting in good words for her. They worked with her in the AWA, I believe. So they put in good words for her. When they went to WWF, so did she. So she ended up getting hired soon after. She ended up beating her mentor, Moolah, mentor for a short time anyway, for the championship, actually, that Moolah had held for like 30-something years. I don't know if she was the first person. I think, wasn't that when she lost it and then got it back and then Sherri beat her for the belt? I could be wrong, but still, she beat Moolah for the championship at some point. Started working with Rockin' Robin soon after that, but she was continuously doing drugs. And Robin recalls an incident where they were working a show, and Sherri kicked her fucking hard in the throat. And she felt bad about it, but like, she shouldn't be all drugged. The point was, you can't be all drugged up on substances before you go out to the ring, putting someone else's life in your hands. When you have someone else's life kind of at risk in a match, your opponent or partner or whatever, you know, you can't be doing that sort of shit, really at all, but especially when you're going on out to the ring. That's just reckless. And again, she felt bad, but that was a sign of things to come, really. Robin thought from that incident, she thought she would die. And then she was fine, obviously, but of course they cut to commercial because they wanted to think, obviously she didn't die because she's talking about it, but like, what came of it? Nothing came of it. They mentioned how Vince wasn't really sold on having an entire women's division. No shit. Back in the early 90s, whatever. So they transitioned her from being a wrestler to managing. And that was really where she made her money because she was a fantastic manager for multiple people, including Randy Savage. And she could get physical because she was trained. So she got physical a lot, but the back end of that, the negative side, was that her body was banged up for taking so many bumps. And obviously they mention that a female's bodies, or Medusa mentions that, a female's body isn't built the same as a men's body, so she really couldn't take as much abuse. But she did, and her body was really banged up for it, and she took drugs to kind of hide the pain. So her son mentions that he never saw her sober. She relied heavily on drugs, had a failed test for marijuana. Of all the things that she was doing, they mentioned that, she didn't just fail once, she failed multiple times. She was brought into the office with Vince and a few other people. And they mentioned, like, listen, you failed your test again, we got to let you go. And she clearly never quite got over that, and it really fucked up her life. Cornette brought her into Smoky Mountain, but she just wasn't reliable. Her friends said that she only took the meds for back pain because she had a lot of back pain from her days in the ring, which is probably true, but that clearly could not have been the only reason why she was taking these drugs. They mentioned she was taking drugs when she was with her husband and she was coming back with all these fucking drugs from hanging out with her friends. So clearly that was not the only reason, that she was just in pain. A definite factor for sure, but not the sole reason. We hear a lot from Bischoff, and Bischoff mentions that he brought her into WCW in 93, paired her with Harlem Heat, and she was a great fit there, but again, she was not reliable. He had to let her go because she would just show up under the influence a lot of the time, and he couldn't have that. She ended up getting remarried to some, like, fucking weird individual. The son did not like whoever she remarried and mentioned that he really tried to drive a wedge between Sherri and the rest of the family. So she never really got to, she never really saw them often anyway, but the new husband was a piece of shit apparently and didn't really do anything to benefit those family ties. They do show her getting inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame, and they showed her line about Bischoff, who was there, actually. That was weird. I've never seen her speech before. That must have been 04 or 05. Probably 04. Could have been 05. I'm not sure. It wasn't in a banquet hall, so it might have been 05. But I'm surprised, actually, in retrospect, with how fucked up she was on the drugs. And maybe at that point she was fine. But if she was that under the influence a lot, even in the early 2000s, and maybe she wasn't as bad as that at that point, that they would induct her. Like, for a long time, they never inducted Jake Roberts, probably because they didn't seem as reliable. Scott Hall, same thing. And then when they finally cleaned up their act is when they got inducted in the early 2010s. Kathy says that WWE, she was under the belief, Kathy was her friend, that WWE was going to bring her back. It was going to bring Sherri back, and that's what she wanted. That was never confirmed, and maybe there were reports indicating that. And this was like 06, maybe 07, after her Hall of Fame induction. They probably said, oh, yeah, she's doing better. We can bring her back, and we can use her. They said to train like the younger women, maybe as a producer. She ended up dying, actually, on June 15th, 2007, at the age of 49, which is just way too young. Now, her friend said she was doing a lot better at that point. She was with her mom a lot of the time, and she just got a new dog, and she was doing great. She died of accidental overdose. So it just doesn't line up to where the friend was like, again, she has her ups and downs to Sherri, but like, if she was doing that well, then why would she have died of an accidental overdose? She clearly overdosed on something, and it wasn't as if, like, you know, people have heart attacks and shit like that, and it's not like the stuff from your past, as clean as you are now, the stuff from your past kind of catching up to you medically. This wasn't a case of that. They said that she died of an accidental overdose. So she took too much of something. I don't know. I mean, they don't really go into great detail about it. I just thought that was interesting. So she couldn't have been she was clearly having lingering issues, whether she was still dealing with pain or just mental, emotional stuff. I'm not sure. But she was clearly going through something, and that was how she passed away. Robert said that he drove, like, as soon as he got the news, he drove right to the funeral, right to where it was happening. He felt empty. And he even did, like, a eulogy and all this other sort of stuff. He looked at the casket while he was giving the eulogy, and he even said, like, why did you leave without me? Or something like that. And we hear from the son and how broken up he was about it. And he obviously really looked up to her and realizes that she's a legend. We hear from the son, we hear from his stepmother, I think, and she gets really emotional about losing Sherri, and I don't know if that was Sherri's mom. I don't know what I mean, it was his stepmom, but she got really emotional about it. Maybe because she was emotional about the son. That part kind of confused me, but it was a really depressing ending. A good episode, though. I mean, as good as it can be considering the subject matter, but good stuff. I learned a lot. Again, a lot of this stuff really isn't news. They very rarely share news stories that haven't been shared before. So a lot of this sort of stuff is kind of already known. But for me personally, I didn't really know a lot of the stuff that's covered on any of these episodes, including this one. So I thought it was really interesting, and I quote-unquote like enjoyed it. I hate to say enjoy it, but I found it very interesting and fascinating for what it was. So good stuff this week from the Sensational Sherri episode of Dark Side of the Ring. Now, I think they have 2 episodes left. I had mentioned in previous reviews that they were going to do one on Kurt Angle. I don't think they are. From what I understand, when they released the episode order, not just the order, but like the list of subjects for the season, Kurt Angle was not among them. They had said Kurt Angle at one point a while ago. Maybe they saw his documentary or something, the one that WWE did on him, and there was also the A&E biography, and thought, you know what, fuck, we can't really do one on him now, or we need more time. I don't know. But they've already done a lot of Kurt Angle stuff in the last year or two. They probably didn't need a dark side on him too. At least not right now. Because the documentary that WWE did probably did it better than they ever could, because they're not going to have Kurt to talk to it for, because he works with WWE, I believe. So anyway, Kurt will not be in the rest of the season. I think the rest of the season is Sandman is next week. I know that for a fact. And then the Black Saturday episode, the Black Tuesday, whatever it was, edition of Dark Side of the Ring, I think is the season finale. They're saving that one for last, if I'm not mistaken. So that's going to be coming up here on the Dark Side of the Ring reviews every weekend here on the channel. Thank you guys for checking out the reviews. I appreciate it. Be sure to like the video, drop a comment, share the video, and subscribe to the channel for more daily content. All my other Dark Side of the Ring reviews down below in the description box. Check them out if you haven't already. Have an awesome one, guys. I'm Graham G. Matthews, and I'll catch your ass down the road.